I'm Lucas. Hello, Malte. Nice to meet you.
Hey Lucas, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Well, I just wanted to start by congratulating you on all the Oscar noms. And I'm not gonna lie, I've seen this movie 10 times. I don't want to sound like that guy as I'm interviewing, but I think it's the greatest war movie ever created. I really do believe that.
Thank you very much. That's
And
that's super kind, and it's sort of been fantastic to hear.
Thank you. But what was it on the night of the BAFTAs that you were feeling this momentum really come together for this film?
Um, well, sort of the 14 BAFTA nominations, then the 9 Oscar nominations really took us by surprise. I mean, sort of we premiered the film in Toronto, then had a European premiere in Zurich, had a sort of had a theatrical run in Germany and other countries, and we could sense that we seem to have made a film that sort of that audiences connected to, and that sort of sparked conversation and debate, and that an audience took something away. But it's, I mean, sort of, you never really know. I mean, sort of it sort of, the BAFTAs were a surprise, and then sort of, to the 9 Oscar nominations even more so. But I mean, sort of, clearly it's something that makes me very happy, especially sort of the depth of the nominations, that so many of our sort of technical departments and heads of departments have been nominated. Sort of makes me very happy, and I'm very happy about the recognition for all of them.
Yeah, it's incredible. I was just gonna ask though, following into my next question, like you were able to acquire some of the most talented department heads, including like James Friend, Heike Merker, and Christian Goldbeck. Like, how did you and Edward discuss hiring the department heads, and how did you feel? I mean, you already explained how did you see them, feel seeing them and recognizing the Academy Awards, but how were you able as a producer, how were you able to obtain such raw talent?
And sort of a lot of them, either Edward or I had previous relationships with. Sort of, I had worked with sort of our costume designer Lizzie Crystal, and our sort of at Heike Merker sort of hair and makeup on my previous production. Edward had worked with James Friend on Patrick Melrose, um, and another series. So Your Honor, actually the Showtime show with Bryan Cranston. So we knew them. Christian, we both didn't know. We knew his work. So we approached him, and especially for German heads of departments, or I mean, sort of, I would possibly for Germans, the book is such a canonical piece of literature, and everybody's read it in school, and possibly again in their twins, like I have and Edward had. And so when we approached people, everybody just sort of really paid attention. And then everybody, including us, got really scared about what we were about to embark on. I mean, sort of, doing that for a relatively limited amount of money. Sort of, we needed to do it in 51, or in the end 52 days. We needed a lot of careful planning, and but also sort of this, obviously, taking something that had been adapted into a masterpiece of a film before, and sort of and still is sort of like a monolith of literature.
Indeed, yeah, it's an incredible film, and I'm sure it took a lot of planning. This kind of leads into my next question, because in America we have tons of filmmaking hubs, but we're really good at faking it on the soundstage. However, but in All Quiet on the Western Front, you have this incredible production design in a natural setting, and it's captured tragically and beautifully by the cinematographer. Like, so how did you transform the land into World War I battlefield with the trenches?
It's we shot the film entirely in the Czech Republic, um, and we found, in our main location basically is the battlefield and the trenches. And that obviously we didn't find, but we found a piece of land which was a former Soviet military airbase. So and we basically sort of, so we had the two landing strips, and we transformed the piece in the middle into our trenches and no man's land. Sort of our set ended up size of, about 1,000 meters. That's 3,000 yards by
Mhm.
by sort of 400. That's sort of 1,200 yards. And that was sort of like between these two runways. So we had access for whatever, diggers, machinery, sort of, and later on, camera gear from both sides. And that's where we built it.
Interesting. Were there any surprises during the process in which the film in your eyes? Like any?
Oh yeah, constantly. I mean, sort of, this is one of the things we constantly struggled with and were very concerned. I mean, sort of, James Friend was very concerned, and our production designer Christian Goldberg was very concerned. Is we wanted to have a real physical experience. So we wanted sort of the mud, and we wanted the cold, and we wanted sort of, and we wanted the craters and the trenches and all of that to be sort of to feel very real. But it also presented us with the challenge of how do we actually move across the field with camera and equipment following our cast, as they attack or retreat. And that really, that was a never-ending concern, of how can we actually build sort of roads or passageways into our set where one can actually move without getting stuck, and yet sort of without it becoming sort of visibly obvious.
Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. Like the novel has like a real visceral quality that depicts like the true horrors and distress these soldiers endured. Like you can see these soldiers as they shatter internally long before any bullet has entered the skin. And as the producer, how did you approach having the responsibility of recreating this heartbreaking story, tackling authenticity, historical accuracy, and how was it having that responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, sort of, I think, as filmmakers, the sort of the or my understanding is sort of the main criteria is not so much authenticity but credibility. And in order to be credible, you need a certain amount of authenticity. So we did have a lot of historical advisors. I mean, the costume department, sort of, the armorers, sort of, obviously, spend a lot of time in the UK in the Imperial War Museum, going to the archives, and so that we would create a certain amount of authenticity. Obviously, you can't have 100% authenticity, right? Sort of, you can't have 300 extras with real bayonets. So they're all rubber bayonets. They just need to look credible enough. And so we try to be as authentic as possible in order to become credible. And the other thing, in sort of, we wanted the experience, or Edward wanted the experience, to be very, very visceral, which sort of, which means we needed to think about what are we going to do about violence? How graphic do we want violence to be? How shocking do we want it to be? And we all felt that, sort of, All Quiet on the Western Front needed to be a violent movie, and it is a violent movie. It's sort of, it grabs you by basically, by the throat and shakes you. But we also never wanted the violence to be exploitative or be there for its own sake, just to shock. Um, we also very much wanted an audience of 15 or 16 to be able to see the film, because the main characters are close to that age. So these were sort of our criteria while approaching it.
Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. It's a big responsibility. And with all the well-deserved Oscar attention, what's the next project you're working on, and what's the hope for the coming years?
Oh, sort of. Edward and I had been working on something which we put aside for All Quiet on the Western Front, um, and hopefully that'll be our joint next project. Sort of, it's too early to say in detail what it is, but we promised ourselves while standing outside of Prague at 4 a.m. in the morning in the frozen mud that our next film would be somewhere under blue skies, and it would be something that people could walk out of the cinema and feel happy about, and we could possibly put a 1980s Italian pop song over the credits.
I love it. I love it, Malte. Thank you so much, seriously. And you helped create such an incredible film that will go down in history. And thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lucas.
Of course.